All Michigan Township tossed out their entire town board last night. A locksmith was even brought in to change the locks on the ousted officials' former offices late night. They were voted out because they supported a controversial battery plant linked to the Chinese government. It is the latest dramatic chapter in a story News Nation's been covering for the last year. And News Nation's senior national correspondent Brian Enton joins us now from Michigan. You were here last night and said that they were going to change the locks if they managed to kick them all out, and they did.
Yeah, they changed the locks, Elizabeth. I think this is almost something Americans all over the country sort of fantasize about, booting out their local government if they don't like them and they're not getting the job done. Well, that's what happened here in Green Charter Township. We're in the town hall. It's very strange because the government is just gone. They all packed up yesterday. This was the supervisor's office. He took his desk, took a bunch of other stuff. It's empty now. The clerk's office down here, Elizabeth, where they do a lot of the town business, is just empty. The new board members are going to move in, get everything going, and they say one of their biggest priorities is stopping that project that's associated with China.
Voters in a small Michigan town.
Good morning, Owasso. This is the Twins with Owasso Live, and this is the Morning Loop. Yeah, we told you we were going to talk about some interesting stuff last week, but we kind of went with the Trump-McDonald stuff on Monday instead because it was just a little bit more hot at the moment. But that right there is awesome. What that town did, kicking out their city officials who were selling their souls to the Chinese government. They're selling their souls, their land, people are corruptible. People can be bought and paid for. I'm sure they were getting major kickbacks from China for that. So it's a sad state that the country's in right now. I mean, I remember 5 years ago, I was driving down to go to, you remember we went to that, our friend's, New Year's party. Yeah. And as we were driving down, we were driving through a beautiful state of Texas. We're driving down, just these open pastures, open fields, and billboards in Chinese saying for sale. I was like, what is this all about? Why are these billboards and these open fields and open properties in Chinese? This is crazy. So, and that was like 5 or 6 years ago now. I can imagine how much more has happened. I mean, how much more property Chinese people are buying up. And it's not people who have moved here from China who want to be American citizens. I'm worried about people who are here from China that really don't care about this country and are here working on behest of the Chinese government. And even if they're not working on behest, it's like they go, you can be a proxy for us to buy property and land, and we'll give you the funds to do it. We'll funnel you the money to do it. That's what's going on with a lot of these weed farms here in Oklahoma. There are Chinese immigrants in New York who are well-adjusted business folks who are buying land on behalf of China, and they're just the proxy. They're the middleman facilitating these property purchases, but they're buying those properties under their name, and then they're letting whatever Chinese benefactor that is funding them do whatever they want with these weed-growing facilities here and smuggling in Chinese immigrants to work them. So, slave labor, essentially. Chinese brothels are huge here in Oklahoma now. But pushing on, what those people did in that government is super cool. They locked out. They said, nope, we're not going to let you sell our town to China. We're not going to be slaves to this battery plant that's being put up here. We're not going to be solely dependent on that. That's really cool. A lot of people who are business-minded might be like, well, they're just holding up progress. Well, we're not going to be slaves to a foreign country. We're not going to be slaves to a foreign company. So good for them. Good for them for standing up to their township. And again, this reminds me of probably the most important event in American history that you don't know about. And I mean, I'm sure people in Tennessee know about it, but we don't know it. If you're outside of Tennessee, you probably don't know about this because it's state history is being taught. And I guarantee you, people in the Democratic Party do not want you to know this story. But it's the Battle of Athens, Tennessee, or it's called the what county war?
McMinn County War.
The McMinn County War, and
or as we like to call it, the Revolution 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Revolution 2 Electric Boogaloo. But yes, so I'll kind of give you like a little backdrop to this. So there was a corrupt business guy or business kind of tycoon named Crump. Kind of like Trump, but no, Crump. But this guy was actually corrupt. Like, I mean, he started buying Democrat. So what he started doing was he started funding sheriff's races. And he installed sheriffs who ran on Democratic tickets who would play ball with him, who would do his legwork for him. And essentially, the first county that fell to the election was Athens County, or the McMinn County fell first, in Athens, the city of Athens. And it was Cantrell. Sheriff Cantrell was the first puppet of the Crump crime syndicate. Now, what ended up happening was this was it kind of started in the 30s, like post-Depression era. So during the slow recovery of the Great Depression is when this guy kind of came into power and started monopolizing, So it really kind of kicked off or took off in 1940 is whenever all these people really started seeing what they could really, really get away with. Mm-hmm. Because what happened? World War II. All the men after Pearl Harbor left. So about 3,000 men from Athens left. So the strong men who could stand up to the political corruption all left to go fight the war. So the weak, corruptible men
and
criminals, they stayed. And of course, they were all Democrats. So they all stayed, and they were appointed to positions of power and authority in the town, and they started abusing this power. So the what Cantrell did, the sheriff. So I mean, you have Crump, you have Cantrell, the appointed sheriff, and he would deputize a bunch of basically criminals. Like he actually released a bunch of criminals out of jail and appointed them positions. And what he did was he paid them based on how many people they arrested.
Yep. So they would arrest people for trumped up drunk and disorderly conduct charges.
Yes.
They would literally just grab. It mainly started with tourists and like vagrants at first.
Yeah.
So.
And here's another interesting point. Cantrell made $60,000 a year as a sheriff. That's over $1 million in today's money. Could you imagine a sheriff making $1 million a year? Everybody'd be lined up to be a sheriff.
Yeah, no kidding.
So he appoints all these corrupt deputies that are all basically former criminals, like violent criminals too, ones who had been in jail for years, because he knew that they had the muscle and wherewithal to do the things he told them to do. And like I said, again, if you give people the comforts and luxury, if you give people job security and positions of authority and people to abuse, they will absolutely take it. They will absolutely take it. Like they have job security, they get to be the authority figures in town. I mean, that's a big deal. And you can do whatever you want unhampered. Another big thing and again, they would they would go and strong arm the local businesses. They would go and harass local townspeople, like what was his name? The Marine who ended up coming back. That was
Bill White.
Bill White. So one of the main characters of this story, Bill White, is a Marine. He's a Marine, and he was in charge of training soldiers at Parris Island, or training Marines at Parris Island. And he came back to visit because somebody in his family died, and he started realizing there was some really bad stuff going on in his town. Like, he tried to get gas, and like this gas station attendant goes, "I'm not giving you gas. There's rationing. Don't you know there's a war going on?" He's like, "Well, I'm a veteran. I'm just trying to get gas so I can go visit my family because I'm going to a funeral." So he saw one of his friends, and he goes, "How come this guy's not letting me get gas?" Because he's saying that, I know rationing's a thing, but I only want 5 gallons. And he goes, "Well, you have to pay the sheriff. So you pay $5 for gas, and then you pay the sheriff an additional $5 to get the gas." And he was like, "What?" So he went over and handed saw the sheriff and said, "Hey, sheriff, I need to get gas." And he gave the sheriff $5, and he paid $5 for his gas. So, I mean, again, back then, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I mean, imagine every time you filled up on gas, you had to pay the sheriff. So there's still the war going on at this point. So after he goes to the funeral and leaves, he goes back to Parris Island and starts going because he's got a duty station to report back to. So after the war kind of ends, and again, remember, there are women running the town. There are women running their husbands' businesses and shops. And again, they're getting strong-armed by these Democrat operatives, these appointed deputies. They'd come in and be like, hey, you need to pay your monthly fee to the sheriffs for protection. So again, they're extorting local businesses. They're collecting money on behalf of the Crump crime syndicate. That's basically a Democratic funding proxy guy, and all these Democrats are working on behalf of Crump in Tennessee. So eventually the war ends, and all the veterans come back, and what they start doing, or what these dumb deputies start doing, these corrupt sheriffs and deputies, they start pulling over all the buses coming back home bringing the soldiers, because they know the soldiers have money in their pockets. So they would pull over all the buses and extort them for cash whenever they got off, and they would say either you're going to pay us or we're going to arrest you for drunk and disorderly. And I'm sure there were some of the guys on the buses were drinking because they got back home. They're celebrating. We're back home finally. Yay. But a lot of them weren't. Bill White witnessed all this even on his bus. Like, he came back on a bus and they were all pulled out and treated like criminals, saying, hey, you all look like you're drunk and we're going to arrest you or you're going to pay a fine.
It didn't matter what you were drinking. Like, they would take it, sniff it, and go, this smells like alcohol. And then they would basically shake them down for money.
So all these guys get back from fighting a war. They come back, and they're being treated like common criminals in their town by these corrupt deputies. So they all start going, well, we're going to come back, and, husbands come back to their businesses and start realizing their wives have been paying the deputies extortion money, and then when they come back and they go, no, I'm not paying you cash. A lot of these guys got beat up by the deputies. A lot of guys, again, they were being arrested in bars. Anytime they go out and try to have drinks with friends, they'd be like drunk and disorderly conduct, and they're getting paid. They're robbing them on top of being paid for every person they arrest by the Crump crime syndicate. So it's just a bad ordeal for a lot of these guys, and they're done with it. So they're going to run for office and try to get these guys kicked out.
Now, it kind of came to a head when a young sailor that returning from home was at a bar, and he was taken outside and beaten by one of the sheriff's deputies, and then he was eventually shot and killed by him. And then they tried to plant a knife on him, but luckily
a local farmer.
There was not a local farmer. He was actually just passing through, but saw and witnessed it, and he goes, there was no way that this kid, and they tried to plant a knife on him.
Navy uniforms don't have pockets. He couldn't have had a knife on him.
Exactly. So he got lucky, and but nothing came of this until after the incident that we're getting to. But anyway, it also came to the fact that the Democrats had fortified all the election and ballot initiatives too. So,
not to mention they dissolved the courts, the court that oversaw any election dispute. So the judge who wanted to see, because a lot of elections had been in dispute for a long time while the soldiers were away, but again, there were no strong men around to challenge it. It was just the old men, the sickly old men and women, or the people who were on the Democrat payroll. So sickly old men weren't going to be able to get anything accomplished. The women weren't going to be able to get anything accomplished. And so the corrupt people who wanted power were all the Democrats, so they weren't going to do anything. They were making money off of everything.
Yep.
So a judge who decided to try to get the election overturned or do some investigations, some of the deputies came in, beat him until he was paralyzed, and they dissolved the courts shortly after that.
Yep. No more courts were allowed. So again, Democrats were fortifying positions either through threats, intimidations, or ballot manipulation, because that's also what happened every single time that someone would dispute, or there was a ballot watcher at one of these locations and they disputed.
They would declare an election emergency. They would take all the ballots to the jailhouse where the sheriff would count all the ballots himself.
Yep.
So again, they were fortifying the election.
The people who were running the election also fortified it, or they would also write off on it, sign off on it, and go, yep.
How interesting that the guys running the elections were also the ones counting the ballots, who were also the ones running for re-election. How convenient for them.
Yep. It's kind of like seeming like there's a history. This is why learning your history is important. It seems like history's kind of repeating itself, especially when it comes to Democrats.
But this time on the federal level. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's why we thought that this story was so important to talk about for today.
Yeah.
But getting back to it, so this all happened pre their veterans leaving, or while the veterans were away at war. They could only make these types of big moves to disassemble the government, and how the powers and checks and balances were were while the soldiers were away, or why all the veterans or the guys who were off fighting the war were gone. And the only people that were there to try to stop this were men too old to go to war, and of course the women that were there. And, you know, this is why, another thing, why men are kind of the more of the cudgel of making things happen in the world, whereas because women are very much more timid and aren't going to cause a scene because, you know, they have to bend basically to the people that can overpower them and whatever like that. Like I said, whereas men, there's a point where they just go, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to fight back.
Yep.
Said women don't do that.
Look, throughout history, women have always, like, you either comply or you die. And we are all the ancestors, or all of our ancestors are the offspring of the ancestors of the women that complied. Again, if there were wiry women who wanted to fight back with their husbands, they were killed. They were probably R-worded, then killed, because they didn't want to have to train these girls into submission. You know, they just got the submissive ones, took them back with their into their enclaves, you know, and they became pseudo slaves or pleasure girls or house servants, whatever.
But yeah, but getting back to what we were talking about.
Yes. So again, throughout, so these veterans come back and they start running elections against these guys, and then they start realizing that these guys are not going to allow them to have a free and fair election, because all these they appoint a bunch of veterans to be watchdogs at these ballot places, and they shoot people at these ballot places. So there was a soldier that went up to go vote, and they're like, it was a black guy, and they was like, you're not voting here. And then two veterans who were watching it, the watchdogs, were like, no, he's going to vote.
Name
and they're like,
Tom Gillespie.
Tom Gillespie.
Gillespie.
And they said, you're not going to vote here. So what ended up happening was they punched him in the face, and then they said, and he just wiped the blood off his face and started walking forward in to go vote, and they said, you're not voting. And then eventually they shot him, didn't he?
Yeah, they shot him. They shot Tom Gillespie in the back, and people rushed him off to the hospital. He luckily didn't die, but he was shot.
And then the two veteran watchdogs were
immediately taken
captured.
Yep.
Were captured and taken to jail.
In which this caused a huge scene, because then a bunch of newspaper folks, you know, media people showed up and were watching. And then at one point, the two veterans took their opportunity, busted through the glass window, and made their escape.
And they tried shooting them, but whoever was in charge had the smarts to be like, I
shouldn't shoot them with the news.
Especially
when
their hands are in the air too. They're just running out into the crowd. Yeah. You know, shooting into a crowd is never a good idea. Of course,
that incident where there was a gunshot and then two veterans who were poll watchers getting taken prisoner and then fleeing caused huge uproar.
And these weren't the only two veterans. There were multiple veterans who were taken to jail, who were the watchdogs watching over and making sure the elections were done fairly. Yep. They had a bunch put in the jailhouse.
And again, same thing as before with previous elections. As soon as this event happened, they immediately closed the
they declared an election emergency, and they said all the ballots will be counted at the sheriff's office.
And they took them to the sheriff's office. And this immediately caused all the veteran groups to
get together and have a meeting. And in this meeting, Bill White, the Marine, basically comes together and says, hey, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but
I've got the speech right here if you want me to
read it. Go ahead and read it.
All right. So basically, Bill White, all the veterans come to this garage, and they have a meeting, and he goes, Bill White, this is him, quoted, well, here you are. After 3 or 4 years of fighting for your country, you survived it all. You came back. And what did you come back to? A free country? You come back to Athens, Tennessee, in McMinn County. That's run by a bunch of outlaws. That they've hired gunmen all over the country right now at this minute. What for? One purpose, to scare you so bad that you won't dare stand up for your rights you've been bleeding and dying for. Some of your mothers and some of your sisters are afraid to walk down the street to their polling places. Lots of men, too, because they know what happens. A car drives by at night and shoots out your windows. If that doesn't scare you enough, they set fire to your house or barn. They'll beat up members of your family and put them in jail for no reason. Is that the kind of freedom you were supposed to be fighting for? Do you know what your rights are supposed to be? How many rights do you have? How many rights have you got left? None. Not even the right to vote in a free election. When you lose that, you have lost everything. And you are damned well going to lose it unless you fight, and fight the only way that they understand. Fire with fire. We've got to make this honest election because we promised the people that if they voted, it would be honest. And it's going to be. But only if we see that it is. We are going to have to run and these organized criminals out of our town, and we can do it if we stick together. Are you afraid of them? Why? I could take a banana stick and run every single one of these pot-bellied draft dodgers across the depot hill. Get the hell out of here and get something to shoot with and come back as fast as you can.
And, yeah, I mean, my gosh. Again, that echoes so true. I mean, you don't have rights unless you're willing to fight and die for them, period. Like, I mean, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of these World War II vets who were these guys at Battle of Athens, Tennessee. Like, we stand on the shoulders of the people who fought the American Revolution. If you are not willing to die and fight for your rights, you have none. You don't have rights if you're not willing to fight or die for them. If you're just going to say, oh, well, we shouldn't actually have to do that. We don't have to be violent. We don't have to do things. Look, we all live at the mercy of the strongest person in the room, period. Like, if a 6'5", 250-pound monster walks in and goes, I'm taking your wife and your girlfriend, and there's nothing you can do about it. Unless you're willing to stand up and fight that guy, he's right. You have no rights, and you have no rights to your wife or your girlfriend. He might not in a world have a right to them because they're free people, but they're not free unless they can fight back too. So that's the sentiment that he's talking about there. So, anyway, shortly after this, they all went straight to the National Guard facility that was nearby.
And they grabbed a bunch of rifles.
I mean, imagine being the guy on guard duty being like, hey, we're all veterans of World War II.
What I've read, it sounds like somebody was very friendly with that guy because, they're all veterans. Like, the guys there were all vets. So it sounds like they knew and they allowed this to happen.
Yeah. And so they grab a bunch of M1 Grands, Thompson submachine guns, a bunch of weapons they're all familiar with using, and took them all, and they went right to the sheriff's house, and they said, hey, we're here to
take those ballot
boxes
and take back the prisoners that you're holding of the other veterans that they took hostage.
And they said, come and get them. And then they said, well, we will. And they said, why don't you call the law? And then, of course, they responded with, there is no law in Athens, Tennessee. And then you also had the origins of the boot. So while he was a guy named James Lockmiller, he is the originator of the Boogaloo Boy outfit. And if you don't know what the Boogaloo Boy outfit is, it is anybody who wears a Hawaiian T-shirt and like jeans, essentially. That is the Boogaloo outfit. James Lockmiller grabbed two 1945 Colts, 1911 Colts, excuse me, and was taking them out, and he said that I'm going to take these, and then he was wearing his Hawaiian shirt, so he is the OG James Lockmiller of the Boogaloo outfit. So good for him. It's just a Hawaiian shirt and some pistols, and that's who James Lockwood is. He's the man, the myth, the legend that started the Boogaloo outfit club. So I always wondered why they wore the Hawaiian shirts, and now I know. Homage to James Lockwood.
That's right.
Or James Lockmiller, excuse me. But yeah, so they go back, and then a firefight ensues, and they fight for a good long while. Then they hear that the National Guard might be coming to basically put an end to the conflict because there's radio broadcasters and stuff there as well, and there you can hear the gunfire in the background from the radio broadcast, and eventually, there are guys that they actually shoot a handful of the deputies, and one of them nobody died, but there were some guys bleeding out in the car, hiding under a car, and eventually a guy goes out and does a blood transfusion right there. One of the veterans who was a medic went out there and gave a blood transfusion to the guy who was bleeding out because he didn't actually want to see anybody hurt or killed in his community.
Yep.
So again, the veterans being magnanimous, doing the right thing, taking care of those guys, but eventually they just go, we got to go get some dynamite to blow up the prison because they won't let those guys out, and that the deputies threatened to kill their hostages that they had, the veterans that they had taken from the polling booths that they still had in the prisons, and they said we're not having that. So
they started dynamiting the police cars and some of their personal vehicles.
Yep.
Some of the police's personal vehicles.
not covered by
outside.
insurance, by the way. Riots are not covered on your personal vehicles, so they were
They
screwed.
didn't have insurance at this point.
I know, but I'm just saying that not covered riots.
100%. But they blew up a bunch of cars, and that scared them enough that scared the policemen enough, or I should say the sheriff's deputies enough to surrender.
Yep.
And
so
they did.
They blew a hole in there, and then they opened up and they shot a bunch of. They shot through the hole that they blew in there, and they were just. Eventually, they just heard, "We surrender," and that's what happened. They got all the ballot boxes, and then they did a fair and free counting out there in the public in front of everyone for all to see, and it turned out that all the veterans who were running swept.
Yep.
It was like 2,000 to 1,000 votes. So.
Then, as it also turns out that nothing happened, they tried to get a investigation to happen, except the National Guard claimed no one had broken. There was no evidence that anyone had broken into their armory.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which veterans usually don't rat out other veterans, especially in a case like this, in this corrupt Democratic run.
Yeah, machine. Yeah, they had the FBI coming down there to arrest people who were involved, and they were just like, "Nope, there's no foul play over here at the National Guard Armory."
Mm-hmm.
So,
but getting back to it is the media still put the entire town on blast and said that was they should have done this through peaceful and through the political means, which, as we already told you before,
they
got rid of
courts.
They disbanded the court. So there was no political means that they could have used.
They had radioed they had telegraphed the governor. They had done all kinds of things in order to try to get somebody to investigate the crime syndicate that they had down there. But guess what? They didn't. Crump had too much money, power, and influence, and he basically was able to keep people from coming in and investigating him or his appointed sheriffs. So that's what happens. I mean, money is power, and when you have that much power, you can see how corrupt things can get. So it's a sad state of affairs. And the only thing the Democrats would take, well, Crump and Trump, they're the same person. That's what's happening right now. It's like, no, that is not even close to being true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if anything, it's the entire Democratic Party and their ilk and what's going on. They're scheming, like I said, them fortifying the 2020 election with their ballot harvesting and their early mail-in votes. So that's it. This just rings true. And, again, you don't have any rights if you're not willing to fight and die for them. Period. We say we live in a free country, but, again, the tree of liberty must be refreshed with the blood of patriots and tyrants.
Yep. And parallels to what we're seeing today is Democrats having people board up and fortify election machines, election boxes. They're having ballot harvesting.
Yeah, again, remember in was it Detroit or somewhere in Chicago where they put up those boards to block the windows so nobody could see them counting. How weird is that? Again, the veterans had out and they let everyone watch them count the votes because they knew they had nothing to hide. Why are you hiding people from watching you vote? Again, they've had those multiple videos of those, those clearly Democrat black ladies who were counting votes, and they go, Biden, 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 and then the poll watcher goes up and goes, the last two were Trump. And she was like, can we continue this? Because they don't care. I mean, if it's not for watchdog organizations and poll watchers, that's what you'll do. You'll have, people who are Democrats are always going to be the ones who are going to be more Johnny on the spot to do these polls because they want to vote more power to the government. They want more power to welfare benefits. They want more power, want more money in all of these ridiculous things that we don't need our tax dollars going to, but that's what these people live off of. And they're like, oh yeah, my life's going to be super comfortable. So I'll just lie and say, hey, this is a Biden vote. This is a Biden vote. And you don't think they're going to do the same? Kamala, it's like, ma'am, the last 5 votes you just tallied were actually Trump votes, but you're just saying that they're Kamala. It's like, if we don't have a transparent way to view how they count the votes and tally them, we're screwed. I mean, people should have to literally go to a town square and everyone, it could be a town event. The entire town could be out there and watch people lift up the votes and read the name.
Yeah.
The more transparent, the better.
Yeah. And the fact that the Democrats are trying to get rid of voter registration ID, and the fact that they have people show up and they go, I mean, they're sending hundreds of lawyers and stuff and suing states for saying, hey, we have non-registered people on the ballots.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to get rid of some of these votes. And the Democrats immediately roll in and go, nope, we're not getting rid of those votes. We're not getting rid of those votes.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that the Republicans don't do that, vice versa. Why would one party be so invested in not getting rid of votes that aren't registered?
Mm-hmm.
So it's questionable. This is history repeating itself. And, I mean, that's why I have right now, if you can see, if you're watching live, I have pictures of January 6th up right now. Like, history kind of repeats itself. Just the only difference is this one was at a more local level. The Battle of Athens was at a more local level. And same with that town that locked out their city council from their city council building. It's like, you can do that at the local level, but if you try this at the federal level, there's too much power for them, and like that's the problem.
Again, January 6th, nobody was armed. There was no gunshots fired except by police officers at unarmed citizens. And Ashley Babbitt was the only person that died.
Yeah, there's no police officers, despite how many people, and I've seen so many left-wing like news sites and like sources say that that several police officers were killed. There were no police officers that were killed. There was one police officer who died 2 days later of like a heart condition.
Of an unrelated heart condition. So it's just disgusting, you know. It's like, and again, the levers of power and the people who are in the media are blasting them as the bad guys, even though Nancy Pelosi took full accountability for it in that video that Seb Gorka posted a while back. She's like, this is my responsibility. I dropped the ball here. I should have had the National Guard prepared and ready.
The two people who are responsible for allowing the National Guard to be deployed
Chuck Schumer.
are the House Speaker and the
majority
House Leader, which was Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Guess who had the power to do that? It was those two right there, and they said no. So they're absolutely right. Nancy Pelosi was absolutely right that was her fault. The president cannot authorize National Guard or any type of military units
troops
on home soil without the governors or whoever's in charge, since Washington, D.C. is technically run by the district, and it's given to the powers given to the majority House Speaker and whatever Chuck Schumer's job is.
The president cannot activate troops on American soil without the governor's consent.
So anyone that says that Trump didn't deploy the National Guard, you're stupid for thinking that it was his responsibility. He couldn't do it. It's not in his job description. It is to the governors, and in Washington, D.C.'s case, the House Speaker and the Majority Leader. So Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are directly responsible for no National Guard being deployed on Washington, D.C. on the 2020 election.
And now it's the most infamous day in American history, despite the fact that there were no weapons present and there was no plan. Like, there was no legitimate plan on how to retake back the government. Like, it was just a bunch of... And again, when you look at the footage, it's just a bunch of grandmas walking around touring the Capitol. That's all it was. This was nothing like the Battle of Athens, Tennessee, which people got hurt, people got shot. But again, the only people that died were the victims of the Democratic operatives. They shot a black man, a black veteran trying to vote. They killed a Navy man and then planted a knife on him to make him seem like, my officers were acting in accordance with the law.
Yeah. Kind of a parallel with the Secret Service shooting Ashley Babbitt.
Yeah.
Former Air Force veteran being shot trying to pull people away from the windows.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you got. I mean, that the Battle of Athens should be required history for all Americans. Not because we want to see anything like that ever happen, but because when push comes to shove and you push people too far, and again, the people of Athens were hopeless. They lived in misery, and that's what they want. They want you to feel hopeless. They want you to feel like you can't change anything. You can't do anything. Guess what? Those veterans came back and said, oh, we can change stuff. We can do stuff. And Bill White led the charge.
Yeah. And just for the record, what you can see, you can even look this up on Wikipedia right now, which I have pulled up, but I'm not going to bring it on the screen. But it says it was 60 veterans, armed veterans, versus 200 police officers, or I should say sheriff's deputies, who were also armed. They had mainly just had handguns or revolvers, and they had one Thompson submachine gun. There's also saying that there were shotguns there, but shotguns aren't going to do a lot for distance. But that's it. Like so it was 200 police officers versus 60 armed veterans. That was it. So there are so many. Think of how many. It takes a small minority of a group to take over and do something like this, and then cause change.
And again, you're not going to. I mean, especially a bunch of thugs who have been strong arming old men and ladies for the past 6 years, and all of a sudden you have a bunch of men who are combat vets come back, and it's like, oh yeah, no, this is like going back to work, rolling up their sleeves, like I just got done doing this. I know what's up.
Yeah, these freaking thug sheriff's deputies, all they have is just, I have a gun, I have the power and the authority.
Right, and then the veteran, I have a gun and I know how to use it.
Yeah, and I've been trained to use this, and I know what to do. I mean, as you can see from the picture here, they literally overturned vehicles to block off roads. That way these people couldn't escape. They blocked off all the major escape routes.
So again, you don't have rights if you're not willing to fight and die for them. Period. So with that being said, I just wanted to kind of relay that little bit of history to you. I think that's super important. It's something that every American should know about the Battle of Athens. It is important history. And it rings true, very true today in our modern times. So that's about all we've got for you today. I'm glad we got to give you this little history lesson. I think it's cool. I love history. And again, if we don't know the mistakes of the past in our history, we're bound and doomed to make those mistakes again. So that's all we've got for you today. This is the Twins with Owasso Live. This was the Morning Loop. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you too can stay in the loop. That's all we've got for you today. God bless you.
See you later, everybody.